Anatol Rodgers dedicated her life to the education of Bahamian children, and in doing so, managed to shape generations of the nation's greatest leaders, who fortunately for the rest of us, developed their intellect, their character, and their potential under her esteemed tutelage. She was known to have said, "What I enjoyed most in my years of teaching was bringing out the best in the weakest and the less able students."
The Anatol Rodgers Memorial Lecture Series was really an expansion of something I did a number of years before, but it also was intended to educate so many younger Bahamians who didn't know who she was and the contribution she had made to the development of the Bahamas.
Mrs. Rodgers began her teaching career upon returning from Atlanta, Georgia, where she obtained a Bachelor of Arts degree in English with highest honors, along with minors in Latin and History from Spelman College, a professional elementary teacher's certificate from the State of Georgia Department of Education, and a master's degree in Latin from Atlanta University. Upon her return, she would begin her illustrious teaching career at the government high school, where she would eventually become the first woman headmistress. She started her own school in her home to educate her children and others who would learn to live by her example.
He came home one day and he said, "Mommy, what's a bastard?" And she looked at him, because we were about 6 at the time, 6 and 7. So she said, "Well, where did you hear that word?" And he said, "Oh, sister said that if our parents aren't Roman Catholic and they aren't married in the Roman Catholic Church, then children are bastards." And that was the last time we went to that school. And I think Rodgers Primary School was born almost overnight.
I wrote a story on it called On the Porch, because that is where the school was. And every morning, I would walk down to Dean's Lane and be met by Mrs. Rodgers, and our classes for the day would begin.
Memory tells me that there was something like 10 or 12 students at that time.
She was a committed and caring woman who had a gift that all good teachers envy: the ability to draw out more from their students than even they believe is possible.
Mrs. Rodgers was a person who believed in the 3 R's. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. She believed in grounding you in as much as she possibly could, and she taught us everything.
It was the development of the whole person. We had to be able to master the Queen's English, spoken and written. We had to have our proper manners, and it was just a very general education.
She made sure that everyone was pulling their weight. She made sure that everyone understood what was being passed on. And she made sure that you demonstrated that you understood what you were being taught.
And Mrs. Rodgers was held in high regard by the entire community, including the Ministry of Education.
In her later years at GHS, she, along with her deputy headmistress, Keva Bethel, would build the legacy of government high school that still resonates with many of the graduates today.
I would say, if I was talking casually, that Keva was the hatchet. Keva carried the big stick. She was the vice principal. She was in charge of discipline. And when she rolled those beautiful eyes, you know that you were in trouble. Mrs. Rodgers' role was a slightly different one, because she was, I would say, the diplomat.
And she ran the school quite firmly. She was a stickler for basics, basic courtesy, punctuality, all those things. But she shared with all the students and wanted the teaching staff to impart to the students a love of learning. What was less obvious was her quiet tending to students who perhaps needed assistance of another kind. Because in those days, people who went to Government High on academic merit, and therefore people from all kinds of strata attended Government High. It didn't mean that they were financially comfortable in some instances. And she was very aware of that, very sensitive to that. So she made sure that, you know, everybody had something to eat. If they didn't have lunch, they couldn't bring lunch, that kind of thing.
My brother might have told you the story about when he was little, he used to see her making mounds and mounds of sandwiches to take to school. And he thought, my God, she's got a humongous appetite. But it was only when he was an adult, he found out that the sandwiches weren't for her, but they were for students at the school, because my mother found that a lot of students, they came without having had breakfast, and sometimes they never had money for lunch.
Anatol Rodgers retired from the government high school in 1975. By that time, she had taught 5 cabinet ministers, including the Prime Minister, 5 senators, 11 members of parliament, and numerous cultural practitioners, teachers, business leaders, and other great Bahamian citizens who all felt the tremendous responsibility they held to shape and develop their nation.
I had the good fortune to teach that class for the 2 years I was there. And I have to say that they were one of the smartest, if not the smartest group of students I have ever actually had the pleasure to teach. They were mischievous, because I think they knew they were smart, and they were sometimes mischievous, but they responded to the challenge. You know, if you wanted to stretch them, they responded very, very well to that.
Anatol Rodgers had a strong sense of purpose, and that purpose is demonstrated in the mission she set out for the government high school. At this school, she addressed her pupils, we aim to give you training in the powers of thinking so that you may learn to form wise judgments.
There was something very special about government high school. And it's difficult to dissect or describe what it was, but you felt it, and you had a certain pride in being a part of that school.
Mrs. Rodgers noted, I cannot overstress how important our becoming independent should be to you. With the privileges and rights you enjoy today, please remember that there are also duties and responsibilities.
Her legacy is excellence.
It was her commitment, you know, to the Bahamas.
Her legacy is a love for learning.
My grandmother probably would say something along these lines if she was alive today. You know, you really, at the end of the day, what are you living for? You know, what do you want people to say afterwards?
And her classic response was always, in life you have to be a participant, not an onlooker. You know, it's time to rest when you're in your grave.
Her legacy is national pride.
No one has any hesitation today in saying what she, you know, was known for, what we all respected her for, respect her still now in this day. And so I don't think she was doing that with any intention of being, you know, famous or having a legacy or anything else. But I just think that in its own right, that stands for something, and that she, you know, that's something that she demonstrated throughout her life.
The legacy of Anatol Rodgers lives on in the lives of those she taught and those she loved. This short film can only encompass a fraction of this legacy. Far more work must be done to illustrate the depth of her influence and the breadth of her contribution. Mrs. Rodgers' life, in many ways, serves as the perfect example of the quintessential Bahamian. Dignified, charitable, knowledgeable, socially dedicated. This is the legacy that she has left with all of us who cherish her memory.